Hey guys, my name is Riven Phoenix, and this is Drawing the Human Figure from Your Mind, Lesson 7. So, in this video, we're going to help ourselves understand artistic thinking, and we need to do this as a crucial part in order to begin the discovery phase of our invention, where we're going to look at understanding the head. So what I wanted to do is I want to take a look at Da Vinci. Let's pick on him for a little bit and understand as to what he was trying to do. So here's one of the drawings Da Vinci had done, and in Da Vinci's time there was no access to the anatomical information that we have in our time. Today we have very powerful softwares that you can buy for anyone can afford, and you can turn these anatomical structures in 3D and analyze them. But if you look in Da Vinci's case, where he had to get access to these dead carcasses, and he cut them up and he analyzed them, and he was trying to figure out how the human being was constructed so he could imprint in his brain the understanding of it, so when he drew it, it would make him a better artist. And of course he was the scientist and innovator and pioneer in this field. But when you look at his drawing, you can start to see that he's trying to state something also to all the artists out there. And if we look at this drawing, so here's a study that he's done of a carcass, right? But you see that what he's doing here is he's drawn a square, and he's for some reason making these mathematical calculations. You can see these lines going across, and he's trying to understand the measurements as to how he could determine, if he had to draw these figures in his paintings, as to how he could make them look more realistic. And he's trying to solve this mystery for himself, and you can see that he's writing notes down as to what he's discovering. So in this context, if you look at this, because in this time we know that this information wasn't there, he is inventing a system, a process that he's trying to put in place in his head as to how when he took these measurements, how everything falls into place. So this square is an invention that he's creating. Let's look at another drawing that he's done, one of his other studies. And you'll see that in this study, where there's a horse here and there's somebody riding on it, he's making those notes again. Then there's a study of a figure sitting on some kind of a pedestal or a rock. And then on this, where we had seen the close-up, another study of this, you can see that he's doing that same thing. He's building these grids, trying to solve these mysteries for himself. And now, if we look at another drawing of his, here we can see that in his study of life drawing, so in his documents he has stated that in order to understand human anatomy, you have to go out and look at real life and start sketching. So if you look at this study, you can see that there are some anomalies in his understanding of how he was trying to solve the mystery of getting to the bottom of some kind of a systematical formula that he could figure out. So in this, I don't know if you can see this, there's a very light figure here, and it's kind of like a stick drawing, and he's doing much like what we've been doing, making these lines and trying to come up with formulas. And then he does other kinds of studies where he uses line drawing to understand the outer structure of the human form. And then here much later he makes a different study of all the curves of the human body being stretched. But if you look closely, you can see that he makes these lines for these anatomical structures that we've been doing in our figure drawing for the leg, for the lower leg. Then he makes a line for the for the upper leg, then the lower leg. And in these drawings, you can see just numerous studies that he's just trying to solve from real life. And here's the back figure, which is a much more deeper understanding to its construction and its outline of all the muscles that he's trying to figure out from this muscular guy. He's holding a sword. And we can also see that he's erased. There's an arm that was protruding that he erases, but he was trying to solve some kind of a problem in understanding the back of the shoulder. And here's another study of the face and lips. And let's look at one last drawing that we have, and this is a much more intricate, detailed study of the carcass that he had done in his understanding of the leg. And he's going into the actual anatomical structure. So he's cut all this stuff up and he's trying to analyze this, making notes. So what's happening here, that in his process, because this information wasn't there and he's handling these carcasses with his hands, he's having to invent in his head the understanding of something that has not been seen by him. So to him, the insides of the human being, and when he started looking at the muscles, he didn't have this information in his head. But when he started studying it, he ended up looking at it from a point of view where he would have to invent these. So as he created this and he started looking at the legs, in his brain all this stuff started imprinting itself, because he was so excited about this information. And the more he looked at it and studied it, this information became the secret toolkits that he ended up having in his brain. So in our case, what we've been doing, if you go back to when we had said if we draw 2 dots here, right, and then we had divided it in 4 parts, and we ended up dividing it in 8 parts. This structure that we had created, we had stated that this is an invention where we're trying to figure out, make into our head a complete original idea that we are thinking is going to be this human structure. And in our findings, when we began to start designing our invention, we started to make some simple basic shapes, just creating our study. Then we had said under the chin we would go 1/3 down, make the collarbone. Then from the bottom of the second head we would make those nipples for the chest, and start drawing, just fleshing it out a little bit, and then make that sternum. Then from the navel go up a little bit, 2/3, measure from the nipple down in these arrows. And you have remembered that we had made these anomalies going downwards, getting the measurement for the love handles. Then we would get the bottom. We could figure out how to create the structure for the chest cavity. And then from the crotch we would go 2/3, make those 2 dots, and start to draw out the line, stop, make a circle. But from what we've been doing is we've been inventing our own rules. So like Da Vinci that he had done, where he was making these grids, trying to understand how the structure of the human being is, he was trying to come up with these formulas. In our understanding, we ended up creating our own line here and a line here. When we measured this out, we understood that if we drew a line, we could figure out almost to where the shoulder would be. And then we would draw and investigated that from the navel we would have the stoppage of the elbow for the upper arm, and then we would draw down like this and draw the arm. So basically the point that I'm trying to make here is that if you take Da Vinci, so let's say this is Da Vinci here, okay, and he's here where he's beginning, let's say, his journey of understanding anatomy, the human figure, and this is us. So the thing is that we are both stuck at the same place. We can assume this because we're in Da Vinci's case, he doesn't have access to information. He has access to carcasses to understand anatomical structures. But in our case, we have all these fantastic anatomical books and software out there. So in order for us to become intimate with the invention of the human being, in Da Vinci's case, we can say that because he was investigating an anatomy where other artists in his place didn't have access to this information, he was fascinated by this subject, and when he started cutting them open and drawing them out and making studies, it became an invention to him because it was an alien world to him. He hadn't seen it before. So he was able to imprint the information into his head and become a master of it. And for our case, what we're doing is we're doing the same thing, where when we have access to all the anatomical books and all the pieces of software, we're saying that when we approach understanding about anatomy, we are going to approach it as if the human being never existed. And to do that, we will use the concept of invention, where we would invent every aspect of it as to the actual idea of it. Like say right here, we can say this, oh, this is an idea we've been having for the human invention. And this is allowing us to feel what Da Vinci had felt. In his excitement, he was able to input that information, and when we now begin to create our studies of our invention to understand it much more better, we are going to use basically the same technique that we've been using. So if you remember, when I had drawn that square and made two squares and made an arrow, we had concluded that if we were the inventors of an object like this and we were asked to draw it again, we had become its master, because the brain was able to remember the invention as an original concept, and we had applied this to understanding the human figure. So now what would happen is that if we now begin our study of the head, we can so let's magnify this here. In our studies, we would in our first ideas, we said, okay, we're beginning to understand that if we draw a line here and try to make the chin and make the human head look like sort of like this in its much more simpler form, here we're going to begin our investigation process, where we are going to invent our own formulas to understanding it. So as an idea, we could say that if we measure from here, let's say if we take the half of this and go this way, and then from here we go up this way, and if we start making lines in this direction, right, and maybe we take a line here and start taking this, we could get the actual angle of the head. So this would become a formula, so we wouldn't end up drawing beyond this line and make it much more realistic. And this is going to be the investigation phase as to coming up with these formulas that will allow us to personally become intimate with the invention and help us understand the construction of the human being. So when we begin this process, you should investigate the construction in your own way also. You can come up with your own formulas or own designs. For instance, like the umbilical cord idea that we had done to imprint, we could say that, oh, okay, if I make a triangle here and do two triangles here, do two along it. I could figure out where exactly the ear fits, and this will help you become a master and become intimate with the invention, so you can draw it from your head. So just let's touch on Michelangelo for a second. So what was found that from understanding what Michelangelo used to do was, when he created his paintings for the Sistine Chapel and all the work he had done numerous studies like this in understanding the construction of the human form, and especially when he had done the statue of David and all his other works. But he would end up burning his studies, and one of the theories went around was because he didn't want people to understand or know his secrets as to how he used to figure out in his formulas to what he had understood about how the design of the human being how he saw it. So lately they discovered, like, I think about 600 drawings of Michelangelo that he didn't want the public to see. And when they found it, when you look at his drawings, you can see that he also used to do studies like this to come up with these understandings, custom understandings of how the construction of the human figure was. Remember, Michelangelo fell in love with the human figure, and when you look at his drawings, they look so fluid, but he understood something about it, and to get to that step, he had to do these studies. And this is the same mechanism that we're going to use in beginning our journey to mastering the human figure. So in the next steps, the next lessons that we're going to do, we're going to begin our study of the human head and become as intimate as we can by creating all these formulas that we can come up with to help us draw it in a 3D form. And every time we think of it, we can magically come up with it. And if somebody asked you as to how you did it, these would be your secrets, your personal investigations that you had done. So I hope you will join me for the next lesson. It'll be exciting. Look forward to meeting you again. Thank you.